video will be a particularly salty one because I will be talking about my least favorite books of 2018. These are the books that have disappointed me so much. I've never been let down like this before. So before I start... So a couple of things before I start. First, in my saltiness, I will be unfiltered. This is a spoiler warning because I am way past the point of discretion. I need to expound my feelings about these books, and my feelings shall expound. Second, I'm not saying they're the worst pieces of literature ever published. Everything I'm saying in this video is purely my own opinion. So if you have a book that ended up on this list, don't take it personally. I'm happy that you enjoyed it. Much power to you. Go, be happy, live your best life. Please don't let this salty bitch ruin any of these books for you. Without any further ado, here are the most disappointing books I've read in 2018. The first book on my list is The Hazelwood by Melissa Albert. This is a dark fantasy story that follows Alice, a girl who's been chased by fairy tale creatures all her life. These fairy tale creatures also happen to be characters from the books her grandmother wrote. So in this age of American Horror Story and Riverdale and basically every dark retelling that becomes popular, this book could not go wrong, except that it did go very, very wrong. The plot was all over the place. A huge chunk of this book is actually just about Alice and her friend Finch traveling or trying to escape the fairy tale creatures, and I wouldn't have minded this so much if some things were actually happening while things weren't happening. It's just that for a large portion of the book, nothing significant actually happens. You know, any event that actually drives the story forward or adds to the lore or even to the development of the characters. And by the last 1/4 of the book, this whole shit show happens. Everything is happening so fast, it's hard to keep up with anything that the author is trying to explain. The author tries to tie some loose ends, which doesn't really work considering how rushed the ending seems. It's too bad since Melissa Albert is actually a really good writer, but I don't think she really developed the plot well. Also, the characters are not really worth taking note of. The protagonist, Alice, is insufferable. She is very temperamental, hypercritical, and overall just a very nasty character. There are characters that are flawed and there are characters that are problematic, and Alice definitely falls in the problematic category. Another major character is Finch, and is the only character who comes close to being likable. If only he had a personality. So the poor characters and poor plot combo doesn't really help this book. My favorite part about The Hazelwood is when Alice and Finch get pulled over by a cop. So basically Finch is asking Alice to chill the fuck out because she's a white girl and he's a black boy, and when worse comes to worse, we all know who's going to get in trouble between the two of them. But instead of actually putting herself in his shoes, Alice goes off on the cop because he called her sweetheart. Afterwards, Finch confronts Alice about this, and she realizes how shitty she was during the whole situation, but instead of feeling contrite and apologizing, she goes off and nearly kills the both of them because she drives off the road and into the forest. So, I understand that it can be frustrating to be talked to in a condescending way, but considering that your friend is scared shitless for his life during that, I don't think being offended was something Alice needed to prioritize at the moment. After this scene, I had absolutely no hope of actually liking Alice. I think this scene alone speaks so much about her character, and I was not here for it at all. The next book on my list is Winter Song by S.J. Jones. Like The Hazelwood, this is one of my most anticipated books of 2018. I bought this during my romantic phase earlier in the year. So this story follows Lisa, a gifted songwriter who can't actually do what she wants because she's a woman, and her sister gets kidnapped by the Goblin King, this supernatural being whose role is actually pretty vague throughout the whole story. So she goes after the Goblin King, and in the process of saving her sister, she falls in love with him and things happen. I had a lot of problems with this book. I don't know where to begin. First of all, the prose was very flowery, like very, very flowery, to the point that I couldn't understand most of what the author was trying to say without having to reread it over and over again. And while flowery prose can add to the story sometimes, other times it just becomes distracting and kakadulaan ko gana because who wants to read one sentence over and over again just to get its meaning? I mean, I'm not stupid. But all I'm saying is not everything needs to sound like Shakespeare. Also, the plot is very, very uneventful. If I complain about Hazelwood being slow, then the Winter Song is slow and dull. I thought there would be a lot of intrigue and magic in this since the atmosphere seems to be very magical. But in reality, the whole book can actually be divided into two big chunks. In this first chunk, it's Liesel actually talking shit about her sister while trying to save her, and in this second chunk, it's about Liesel thirsting for the Goblin King. The only thing I hate more than the girl-on-girl hate trope is the girl-on-girl hate trope between sisters. I do not understand why the whole premise revolves around Liesel trying to save her sister when Liesel doesn't seem to even like her sister that much. There are numerous, and I mean numerous, instances where Liesel slut-shames her sister and speaks badly about her because she's jealous of her sister's beauty. And while Liesel does get some epiphany in the end about her relationship with her sister, I don't think it was enough to actually redeem how bad she was thinking about her sister in the beginning of the book. I mean, Liesel was thinking some toxic shit, and it was really a turn off. Like, I'm not here for that anymore. Like, I'm getting really, really tired of all the girl-on-girl hate on YA books. That trend needs to stop. Hindi siya sadya. Wala na akong nalipay. The next book on my list is Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo. Shadow and Bone is the first book in the Grishaverse trilogy. So the whole premise of the Grisha trilogy, basically there are these people with special abilities and there's this political and magical imbalance in the world, plus the dark creatures threatening their existence. And the main protagonist, Alina, is this super important person because she has this rare gift. If only she was actually smart enough to make some use of it. I'm not saying that Alina is a stupid character. At most, she's naive. Sometimes it's just frustrating to read about a character who doesn't seem to grow despite everything that's happening around her. Also, the story is very generic, which is a very big surprise for me considering that I read Leigh Bardugo's Six of Crows duology and her Language of Thorns book, and it was nothing similar to this. To be frank, I think this is Leigh Bardugo's most mediocre work, and it's not at par with how Leigh Bardugo writes now. Everything just falls flat for me. This book had so much potential considering its story, but the execution just wasn't there. The next book on my list is actually a painful one for me to include since this has a very great sentimental value for me, and it is Brisingar by Christopher Paolini. Brisingar was the last book that I borrowed from our high school library, and I clearly remember enjoying it so much, so I don't know why I didn't enjoy it now. In all honesty, I don't think the saga even needs this book. There's nothing that happens here that actually adds to the story, to the lore, or development of the characters, except for that one tragic part in the end of the book where a beloved character As a whole, the Inheritance Saga actually does have a slow pace, but Brisingar is just sluggish, and considering that nothing much happens in this book, it's not really worth the read. As much as I love the saga, I just didn't think this book was necessary. Next book on my list is The Afterlife of Holly Chase by Cynthia Hand. This is a modern retelling of A Christmas Carol. Basically, in this year and age, there's this pseudo-supernatural organization that picks a Scrooge and reenacts the Christmas Carol using the people in his or her life in an attempt to change her. The main protagonist, Holly Chase, is actually a failed Scrooge, meaning to say she didn't change, so she has to live her life in purgatory, playing the role of the ghost of Christmas past during these reenactments. You know, the story had a lot of potential. I mean, this modern retelling of the Christmas Carol is actually an ingenious idea, but you cannot convince me, not in a million years, that the catalyst for Holly to change is some good-looking guy that she doesn't even know very well but just relates to because she was like that before, instead of the people that have actually had significant roles in her life. No, I mean, the whole book hinged upon a romance that was so unnecessary that it ruined the whole story for me. There was a plethora of other characters that might have been better suited to be catalyst for Holly's change, but no, we had to stick with the pretty boy. And because of that, a lot of these characters actually became just side characters without any personality. They were actually very two-dimensional. So aside from Holly, everyone else is actually pretty meh. I will say though that it does have a very warm, nice, happy ending, and I'm always a slut for happy endings, so there's that. The next book on my list is All the Crooked Saints by Maggie Stiefvater. Now, while I dislike this book, I really like the cover, so this book is about a family with magical abilities. Well, magical, supernatural. They can perform miracles. So I don't know what category that falls into. Mutant, sila hindi ko. Anyway, this family has sort of made a small village where people from different walks of life can congregate to ask for miracles, but miracles don't come as easily as people think, so that's the whole premise. Maggie Stiefvater is a very, very good writer. Her prose is very beautiful, very easy to... It's flowery, but it's very easy to follow. There are segments in this book that are actually very heartwarming and thoughtful. The biggest problem with this is that it doesn't have a very concrete plot or a very rational plot. It's just that the whole book seems to revolve around the idea that miracles are hard to come by, and the ending of the book just sort of refutes all that. It's actually a very ridiculous hot pile of mess, and this is a perfect example of how a very bad ending can really ruin a book for you, because the book actually started out great until, I don't know, the 1/4 marker. It went downhill from there. So, oh, what you could have been. The next books on my list are Batman and Robin Eternal Volumes 1 and 2. I was very excited to read this comic because my baby, my precious baby girl, Cassandra Cain, has reappeared after a long absence from the DC universe, and I was very excited to read about her again. But to be very, very, very honest, these comics were just a hot pile of shit. It's like the writers didn't even try anymore. The whole story, the whole plot, every scene, every dialogue was just so ridiculous and cringy and awkward. A perfect example of how ridiculous this book is was the scene where Dick suspects Tim of being the rat in the group, and so he goes to Tim's house to confront him, but Tim's house transforms into this octopus Fort Knox thing, and in the middle of the day, Tim Drake in full Red Robin costume strides towards Dick and punches his lights out. First of all, I know that Tim is a boy genius, but to transform a whole house into this mechanical security robot, boy. Second, why would Tim, in all his infinite wisdom, walk in broad daylight in full costume towards a house where people know Tim Drake lives? Like, what's the point of the mask anymore? Let's just waltz right into Tim Drake's house. Also, I'm particularly salty that they changed Cassandra Cain's origin story. It became very, very generic. I mean, Cassandra Cain's origin story was already really good to begin with. I don't know why the writers thought they needed to change that, and I think it took away from Cassie's character, and that really pissed me off because nobody's going to do my baby bad like that. The last book on my list is Tequila Kingdom by Alexandra Christo. Just thinking about talking about this book actually, though wala na ko gana, because it disappointed me that much. Not to be dramatic, but this book betrayed me, and I don't take well to things and people that betray me. So the whole premise of Tequila Kingdom is that there's this badass siren princess who gets turned into a human and has to kill this human prince who is also a badass pirate. So it's this sort of dark Little Mermaid retelling. And I was really excited for this until I found out that it was a very generic, tropey shit show, and reading it was a very shitty experience. Everything about this book seems forced. The camaraderie, the conversations, the characters. I mean, do I really need to be reminded every other page how badass Lyra is, even though she doesn't even seem to show it? And the only silver lining is this book is Yuriko, who is the only character I liked. She's smart, she knows what she wants, and she knows how to get it, and she gets hated on for that, which is hypocritical for the other characters because that's kind of what they are. I mean, so Lyra and the prince can be selfish and do anything to get what they want, but Yuriko can't. An especially favorite scene of mine is when they're trekking up this treacherous icy mountain and Yuriko tells them to hurry the fuck up or they'll freeze their asses, and Lyra is offended because Yuriko is bossing her around. Who does she think she is? Well, ma'am, first of all, you are from the sea and you don't know anything about these treacherous mountains, which happen to be Yuriko's hometown. And second of all, if you want to freeze your ass off, go ahead. Overall, it was a very bland, very meh book. It wasn't worth the time and the effort to read it, and it was a lot of effort. So that's it for my least favorite books of 2018. I'm sorry for the saltiness. The least you can do is put all the salt in your fries. I'll see you in the next video, unless na-turn off ka na sa ako and then meh.